So thank you everybody for being with us here tonight. We hope you have fun with the trivia and the craft. But it's that time of the night to receive our guest speaker. And we have Dr. Domenic Diamore. He's an associate professor at Daemen College in Buffalo, New York. And we are very excited to learn more about his research and his journey in the sciences. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and welcome to our late night.
My pleasure. Just let me bring up the screen and we'll get started.
Sure.
All right. Seems to be loading. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Captions. Just testing the captions. Excellent. Everyone can see the captions, right?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's get started. Hi, thank you for introducing me. My name is Domenic Diamore. I actually went to Rutgers to get my PhD. So I know the Jersey area. I know Rutgers, and I was very honored to speak with you guys. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my work and also how the work I did when I was at Rutgers eventually led to the work that I'm doing right now. And I've always been interested in marks that are left on bones, presumably by dinosaurs. I feel that there's a lot of information that can come from these marks. So I've always been interested in dinosaurs, the marks they leave, but the question is, how do they leave those marks and what can we learn from those type of marks? All right, so just to give you an idea, this was me when I was in Rutgers. I had a lot more hair. And this is me in my recent dig. I actually go on a yearly dig to both Utah and New Mexico with the LA County Museum. And we dig up both Jurassic and Cretaceous fossils. This is me with a Diplodocus humerus. It's very big. Beautiful specimens, a lot of fun. So what's happened in between the picture on the left and the picture on the right? Well, a lot. And I'm going to talk about how the things that I learned at Rutgers and my research that I started there eventually led to the things that I'm doing now. And there's a couple things I'm going to highlight as I talk about this. I'm going to talk about one thing, how networking and collaborating with other researchers really has helped me refine what I want to do, as well as how you can help. Volunteering and citizen science and just working with the museum and taking an interest in paleontology, even if you're not officially a scientist, is super helpful in the scientific process. And you'll see this a little bit later. So I've always been interested in dinosaur teeth, particularly carnivorous dinosaur teeth. Now, the carnivorous dinosaurs or theropods have a very distinct tooth shape. It's called zyphodont. If you were to translate that from Greek, it would mean zyphos means sword and dont means tooth. So these teeth look kind of like swords or sabers. You can kind of see it. They curve back and they are very much flattened. Okay. Also, they often tend to have serrations. So clearly, they're very good at eating meat with these. Okay. But since there are no toothed dinosaurs left, yes, birds are dinosaurs, but unfortunately, they don't have teeth. So there are no toothed dinosaurs left. We don't know how, how they use these teeth. I mean, how did they move their head when they bit down? Were they mostly scavengers or hunters? Did they hunt in packs? How did they eat the prey animal after they killed it? All kinds of these questions. We don't know. We have no idea. So one of the questions was, how do these animals use their teeth? And that's what got me into tooth marks. Now, tooth marks, the research on tooth marks belongs to a much larger discipline within paleontology, and we refer to this as taphonomy. Taphonomy means, in the literal translation, the laws of burial. Okay, and if you want to think about paleontology from the standpoint of looking at the fossil other than the animal that owned it, this is very helpful. So think about it. You have an animal, the animal dies, it gets buried, and then millions of years later, we dig it up, right? We could look at the fossil and we could say, okay, this bone belonged to this animal, and describe the animal. But also, what happened to the animal between when it died and when we found it? That's what taphonomy is. So we can look at the bone and see, okay, what condition was it in when it was buried? And how's the fossil look? Does it have any marks? Was it trampled on? Was it bitten? Maybe if it's a more recent fossil from when people are around, did people butcher it? Things like that. Is the skeleton in pieces? Is the skeleton all together? So it's things other than the animal itself that we look at when we do taphonomy. And this is a very recent field. Many people who are paleontology enthusiasts have never heard this word, but it is very helpful because when you look at these fossils, you can determine a lot about the environment and the way that the animal lived and died by looking at taphonomy. Archaeologists love it because they love to look at bones to see if, they've been butchered by ancient hominids or things like that. But it's not as popular with dinosaurs. So one of the things I wanted to do at Rutgers was apply this discipline to, dinosaurs. And if you look at the picture on the left, that's Robert Blumenschein. Um, he's an anthropologist over at Rutgers, and I worked with him on several projects. So I want to know about tooth marks. Now, tooth marks to me are the most interesting because they definitely fall within taphonomy, because after the animal dies, the bones get gnawed on or chewed on or whatever, and the marks end up being left over. So we can use those marks to determine, what type of animal was eating the dead animal, how many were, um, what kind of behavior they used to eat it, and you can answer a lot of questions that I have concerning paleontology. So the best way to do experiments with taphonomy is to look at something that is alive now and see how it acts and see what kind of marks it leaves on bones, and then compare the marks from the living animal to the fossil. But as I said earlier, there are no toothed dinosaurs left over. Well, when we have birds, they have no teeth. So this puts us in a bad spot. How can we determine how animals with zyphodontition eat if there are none left? Well, there's no dinosaurs with them, but we do have one living animal that has zyphodont teeth, and it's the Komodo dragon. And I just remember being in graduate school and saying, wow, I'm going to do my dissertation work on Komodo dragons. That's really cool. So one of my experiments that I did was I went to zoos and I fed Komodo dragons. I fed them meat and I fed them bones, and I looked to see how the Komodo dragons would eat the meat and if they left marks on the bones. Also, what did the marks look like? How do the marks show the way that the animal consumes the carcass, etc., etc. And then what I would do is I'll compare them to fossil marks and see what I can learn by comparison. Okay, so this picture I took myself. This is Castor. He is a male Komodo dragon at the Denver Zoo, and he was very hungry, so he helped out. Now you can see these are Komodo dragon teeth on the right, and you can see they're very much zyphodont. They're very curved and serrated, and pretty impressive. So what I did, and this is an actual video I took watching a Komodo eat, is it's a very simple experiment. I bought some butchered goats, right? So I went to the butcher shop, I got a piece of meat, and I tied a rope to it, and I put it in the enclosure, and I let the Komodo go crazy, do whatever it wanted to do. And then after the Komodo was finished, I took it out, and I boiled the meat off of the bones, and then I examined the bones to look at the marks that the animal left. And as you can see here, they weren't shy. They had no problem moving the carcass, biting down on the carcass, pulling the carcass, Yeah, so we got a lot of good data from it, and we got a lot of good marks too. And Komodos are actually really cute. They you expect them to be scary, but they're actually really cute, and the ones at the zoos are very well trained, so they were great for my research. All right, so these are some of the kind of marks that I found. And I found three major types of marks that Komodos leave with their xiphodont teeth. They either drag their teeth across the bone with the tip, and that leaves something we call a score. Or what they do is they take their tooth and they jab it into the bone and then they pull it back out. Typically, this is just because they got a bad angle. We refer to this as a pit. And the last kind of mark is something I call an edge mark. And this is unique to xiphodont animals. Because what happens is, as the Komodo would drag its teeth back, sometimes the back edge of the tooth would chop into bone and get stuck. And then they'd pull it out and start over, right? This resulted in the edge mark, as you can see on the bottom right. So we have three major types of marks that were left by Komodos, okay? And this was very interesting. So for this study, I measured how many of these, I measured how long they are, how much they curve, the relative amounts, et cetera, et cetera. What I did is I then compared them to tooth marks from Mesozoic fossils that we have in the literature. So in papers and publications, et cetera. And you can see they are very similar. Okay, so it is very interesting what I found. I found that the Komodo dragon and theropod dinosaurs produce very similar marks when they drag their teeth, or when they consume carcasses and when they drag their teeth across bones. So this was a nice, little study, and it showed that we can use modern animals like the Komodo dragon to learn about dinosaurs. And it was really a good study. So another thing that I found that was interesting was sometimes a tooth will move across the bone and leave little stripes. We call these stripes striations. And the reason they do that is because they have a serrated edge, like a serrated knife, right? They have a serrated edge on their tooth. And when they eat, they scrape the bone and leave little marks from these serrations, and we call these striations. Now, you might not be able to see them now, but if you zoom in, there they are. And they're these little marks that run across the bone. And I thought this was really interesting because there have been no studies that look at how these were produced, but the Komodos made them, and we find them with dinosaurs all the time. So there's another really interesting thing I found. So another question I had is, can we learn anything interesting about the animal from these striated marks? Okay. So what I did is I looked at some teeth of some dinosaurs, and I found an interesting thing. What happens is, as the dinosaur gets bigger, the serrations on its teeth get bigger. And as the serrations on its teeth would get bigger, you'd expect that the striations, or those marks on the bone, would get bigger too. So I found that you can actually figure out the size of the dinosaur based on these special kind of marks, okay? It's a little more complicated than that, but for the most part, that's the case. So if we find a mark with those stripes or striations, we can, in theory, say how big the animal is that ate it. And that's really interesting to scientists, because we want to know, who was eating who, because we can't go back in time and see it. So in order to figure that out, this is a great way to figure it out. We can't tell the individual species, but we can tell the size. So that's what I did when I was at Rutgers. Then I graduated from Rutgers Ecology and Evolution, and I got my job at Daemen, and I've been working there for, it's about 11 years now. Okay, so a couple of years ago, a researcher contacted me. She's a friend of mine who works out of the University of Tennessee, and she studies taphonomy too. She's interested in crocodile tooth marks. And she said to me, I am doing a study where I'm looking at tooth marks with a coworker of mine in Colorado. Do you want to work with me? And I go, sure. And that's, by the way, how science works. It's not very, we're not competing with each other. We want to work together. There's lots of good collaboration. And this is an example of that collaboration. I study Komodo Dragon marks. She studies croc marks. It's good. We make a good team. Now, the person that she works with is Julia McHugh. It's over in the Museum of Western Colorado. And she is in charge of all of these digs that go on every summer there, where they dig up numerous fossils from the Jurassic. Many, many types of ankylosaurs, diplodocids, allosaurids, things like that. Some of these you may have heard of, some of you may not have, but it's a really good site to dig at. Now, this quarry, which is called the Mygetmore Quarry, which is named after the people who found it. Okay, they have all kinds of things. I mentioned some of the dinosaurs. They also have crocodiles, crocodiliomorphs, which are just outside crocodilians, turtles, fish, a bunch of aquatic invertebrates, all kinds of things you could possibly want. But what's really interesting is that they have two big predators. And these big predators are very interesting for the kind of research she wants to do. They have Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus. Ceratosaurus is on the left, Allosaurus is on the right. And they lived at the same time, and they were both the big predators in the area. Now, there's other predators that could have lived there that live around the same time, but they've never been found there. Okay, so Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus are the only ones that have been confirmed in the area. Okay, so why does this matter? Oops, excuse me. Well, here's my pitch for citizen science. There's lots of volunteers that work at the Mygetmore Quarry, and they have collected thousands of fossils for over 30 years. And it's all museum staff or museum volunteers, high school kids, some middle school kids, locals who just want to dig in the dirt for a little bit. They come out and they help. And they have found many, 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 many fossils. Now, not all these fossils are pretty. Some of them are ugly, ugly fossils. They're broken pieces or chipped or worn or damaged or something like that. But because Julia had so many great people working for her, she had the staffing to collect all of them. Okay. So they have lots and lots of great fossils and some that aren't that great. And it's the ones that aren't that great looking that are valuable to me. Because what she did is she hired a college student. Now, I believe that many of you, may have aspirations to go to college and may want to study paleontology. Well, this is a geology student right here, Miriam, who is looking at these fossils, and she's cataloging them and going through each of them. And so that's one way that she's helping out as well. So what happened is this: Miriam and Anya, which are two college students, they're 19 years old, 20 years old, they went through all those fossils, over 2,300 fossils, and looked at all of them for tooth marks. And what they found was a lot of tooth marks, over 600 tooth marks. This is amazing. So I'm very excited about this. My friend and coworker Stephanie are really excited about this too. We have all these tooth marks on all these bones. Maybe we can look at them and see what kind of information we can find out by looking at these tooth marks. Okay, so that's what we did. It was myself, Julia, and Stephanie. We all worked together with these two students, and we looked at all these marks, and we tried to figure out as much as we could about the ancient environment, or what we call ecosystem, from them. So there were lots of marks, okay, and many of them were striated, so they had those little stripes. And if you look at the diagram A, clearly there's lots of stripes on that one, lots of striations. So what I did is, so what we did is we looked at the parts of the skeletons that were marked, and we also tried to figure out the size of the animals that made these marks. Okay, so first let's talk about the parts. Okay, so this is Myomoripelta. It's an ankylosaur. Lots of ankylosaur scutes and leg bones and things like that, and they were scratched up all over the place. We also had many diplodocids like this Diplodocus, right? Scratched up all over the meaty parts, the legs, and also some parts like the tail, and some parts you wouldn't expect that have a lot of meat on them. So we thought this was a little surprising. And then we also found marked up Allosaurus bones. And it's like, that's interesting. That means that a predator was eating one of these predators. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the Allosaurus was alive and killed by another predator. It might have just died and something ate it. So we don't know that. But we do know that this is predator on predator feeding. What was really cool is the place on the skeleton where the bones were marked. The dead Allosaurus had bones in its tail and its toes that were chewed on. So we said to ourselves, there's not a lot of meat on there. That's not what I would want to eat. If I was eating an Allosaurus, I wouldn't eat tail and toes. Why would you eat that? And this is the interesting thing. In modern, concerning like lions and hyenas and modern predators, they'll only eat the toes and the tail and that stuff if there's nothing else to eat. So we were able to figure out that this, what we call assemblage, or the environment where these fossils were accumulated, was an environment where there wasn't a lot of food. Probably these things had died and the carcass was taken apart, and then the animals were still so hungry that they were gnawing on toe bones and tails. So this is what we call a stressed environment, or an environment where, beggars can't be choosers, and I'm just going to eat anything I can find. And like I said, we looked at the striated tooth marks in order to figure out the size of the animal that was making the marks, right? Now, some of the striated tooth marks indicate your typical sized Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus, and you can see, relatively speaking, how big these animals are to a person. But we also found some tooth marks that indicate there was something bigger. So this is Torvasaurus. We've never found a Torvasaurus in this area, but we know they lived around that time. So Torvasaurus, very big guy, okay? And Torvasaurus, and the tooth mark said maybe Torvasaurus was also there making tooth marks. So the tooth marks show that even though we haven't found bones, there might be an even bigger animal at the site. And then we found tooth marks that are so big, they may indicate this animal, which is called Saurophaganax, which is a huge allosaur relative of Allosaurus. And this size animal was probably the only size animal that made some of the marks. So not only did the marks tell us a lot about what kind of environment there was, how much food there was, who was eating whom, but also we can hypothesize animals that lived there from tooth marks and ate there, even if we don't actually have their skeletons. So this was really, really interesting. So we came to a lot of conclusions. Either Ceratosaurus was scavenging on Allosaurus, maybe Allosaurus was cannibalizing on itself, and maybe even there was an even bigger predator there that we just haven't found bones of yet that was eating. All of this information from tooth marks. So really, really exciting. And then the icing on the cake, we published it. It was a great paper. We're really happy about it. And those are all the authors. I'm the one at the end. And then, in order to kind of add a little drama to it, we hired a paleo artist. Okay, and this is Brian Eng. He's a wonderful, wonderful paleo artist. This is him holding up the award at the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology for the best art. And we're like, you're the best. Please, we want you to do a picture of this scene of this stressed environment with Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus eating. So he came up with this. Boom. Pretty intense, right? So you have Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus fighting over an Allosaurus carcass. It's old, it's smelly, there's bugs everywhere, and it's just an environment where there's not a lot of food, so they're at each other's throats eating whatever they can. And so that's my story. So it started off back in the 2000s at Rutgers studying tooth marks of Komodo dragons, and now we learned something about the way Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus live their lives. So it was great research, and that's my talk. Thank you for having me here, and I'm looking forward to any questions.
All right, Dominic, you can unshare your screen and then go over to the Google Doc where we've started compiling the questions.
Okay.
And if anyone does have any questions, please post them in the chat and we'll make sure Dominic gets to answer them.
All right. Wow, these questions, a lot of questions. Oh, geez. Excellent. All right. So the first question is, what is the most unusual fossil you have found and where was it? That's a tough one. Uh, so when I was in New Mexico, I found it's kind of interesting. I found several turtle shells, and turtle shells are kind of boring. But what's really interesting is these turtle shells were kind of strange. They had long rib-like structures, and the shells were incomplete. And what I realized is they're all what we call trionychids, or soft-shell turtles. So they were so unusual to me. They're not unusual if you know those shells, but they were so unusual to me that I spent the whole day trying to figure out what they were. And then I went to a turtle expert, and I'm like, what is this? And it's like, oh, it's a trionychid. It's a soft-shell turtle. I'm like, wow, okay. So I thought that was interesting. Another interesting fossil that I found is the teeth of sauropods, which are long-necked dinosaurs, are very rare. And we found titanosaur teeth just laying out on the ground, and they were very unusual and very interesting. Titanosaur teeth are basically like little pencils with pegs at the end, and they were fascinating. So those were two interesting fossils I found. The rest of the fossils that I found are pretty much stuff you'd expect to find from your typical allosaurids or sauropods or whatever. Are fossils found on all continents? Yes. Yes, they are. That's a great question. We have found dinosaurs alone have been found on all continents. They have North American fossils are clearly very common. I have coworkers in Argentina who dig up fossils in South America, lots of them. They're actually some close friends of mine that are from Argentina. Europe is where dinosaurs were named, so we clearly have dinosaurs from Europe. There are African fossils, typically earlier fossils like those from the Triassic. They're definitely very common. Recently, they've found dinosaurs in Australia as well. And the fossils from Asia, from China, have been absolutely gorgeous. There's some beautiful fossils from Asia as well. Velociraptors from Mongolia, and now we have, Microraptors from China, as well as several other dinosaurs. So yes, fossils are found on all continents. But if you notice, I left out a continent, Antarctica. Well, I have a friend, Matt Lamana, who works at the Pittsburgh Museum, and he studies, he studies fossils from Antarctica. He actually goes there and he digs up Antarctic fossils. So yeah, every continent. That's a great question. Okay, another question. Where was the first fossil? Where was the first fossil you ever found, and where was the biggest fossil you have ever found? Well, the first fossil I ever found was in New Mexico, and it was the jawbone of something called Bistaherverser, which is a smaller version of Tyrannosaurus. So it's a Tyrannosaurid. And I was walking around doing what we call prospecting, where I'm just looking for, stuff eroding out of rocks. And I saw this very nice brown piece coming out of a rock. This is with a friend and coworker, Pedro Mocho, who works over in Lisbon. And we found that. And we're still digging up that animal now. Okay, even several years later, we had to remove the top of a mountain. So the first fossil I ever found, we're still working on getting it out because it's really deep in a hill. And the biggest fossil I've ever found, a Diplodocus, easily. Diplodocus, we found a Diplodocus in the Morrison Formation, which is Jurassic sediment in Utah. And Diplodocids are very big. We believe the animal that came from is probably 50 tons when it was alive. So very, very large. I got a question from Jamie. Is it possible to determine the color of a dinosaur from its fossils? Usually no, sometimes yes. Okay, so there are some smaller dinosaurs. So typically no, typically it's just the bones. But there are some smaller dinosaurs that they found in China where they have feathers, and Sinceraopteryx is actually one of them. Sinceraopteryx was a small feathered theropod dinosaur, and it is preserved so well that you can see the feathers. And the feathers are preserved so well that pigments are actually preserved. And what we found is that the tail of this animal was actually striped. It went black, white, black, white, black, white. So it kind of looked like a lemur tail. So although rare, there are circumstances where you can actually determine the color of a fossil of an animal based on its fossils. Like I said, not super common, but it happens. What is the tallest dinosaur? That's very interesting. I have to think about that. Typically, they say what is the longest dinosaur or what is the heaviest dinosaur. But the tallest, I don't know. It might be Argentinosaurus. Those guys were big. Or it might be Titanosaurus. It's definitely one of the Titanosaurs. Now, Titanosaur are long-necked dinosaurs that lived in South America and southern North America in the Jurassic and Cretaceous, mostly the Cretaceous. I'm willing to bet it's probably one of those guys. I don't know for sure. I haven't measured them, but that's definitely the group that you want to look at. Is it possible to determine the size of an animal from its tooth? Well, the study I was doing showed that you can generally determine the size of the animal based on the serrations on its tooth. So, yeah, that's one of the things that I discovered. Now, it's not perfect because teeth are different sizes, so it can vary. And also, not every dinosaur has serrated teeth. So it doesn't work every time, but it works some of the time. And we've actually made a lot of progress determining the size of animals from their teeth. And here's another thing. With our teeth, as humans, we have the same teeth for most of our lives. You have your baby teeth, they fall out, then you have your adult teeth, and they stay for the rest of your life. But dinosaurs kept making new teeth. Their teeth would fall out and they grow new ones, and they fall out and grow new ones. Okay, most reptiles do this. So as the animal gets bigger, the teeth get bigger as well. And if we can come up with a rate for how much the animal grows with as the teeth grow, we can figure out how big the animal is. So for the most part, yeah. What is the strangest location that you found a fossil? Let's see. I can't really think of any place that's too strange. Let's see. So one time I found a Tyrannosaurus tooth at the very tippy top of a hill, which I thought was crazy because you'd expect these Tyrannosaur teeth to erode out of the side of the hill and fall down. But this tooth was at the very tip top of the hill, and it was a big one. It was like this big, chunky Tyrannosaurus tooth. And I was like, why is it here? Um, so I thought it was very strange that it was at the top of this hill. So what I think happened is actually someone probably found it and then put it up on top of the hill. So I thought that was a little strange. But I have to admit, I haven't really found too many fossils in too strange places. Um, Typically, the work that I do, we've already found the fossils, and I'm the one digging it up. So I would actually be interested to ask some of my paleontologist friends, and they'll probably have much more interesting answers. All right, next question. Are you able to determine the health of the dinosaur from its teeth? The health of dinosaurs is a very interesting topic. We refer to this as something called paleopathology. Okay, so pathos means sickness, and of course, paleontology means of ancient life, right? So paleopathology is looking at fossils to determine if the animal was sick or well and what evidence there is. I don't know if are any studies done on dinosaur teeth and looking at the health of their teeth, but there are lots of studies looking at the health of other dinosaur skeletal parts. So there's lots of research looking at arthritis in dinosaur joints. So hadrosaurs, or the duck-billed dinosaurs, they had frequent arthritis, and if you look at some of the bones in their joints, they are they don't look too good. They're all abraded and have nodules on them, which indicates that as they got older, they had arthritic joints. Also, Sue, arguably the most famous Tyrannosaurus, that one actually has a jaw infection and has holes in its jaw based on some sort of parasite that was infecting its jaw. And also, there are dinosaurs that show injuries that they've recovered from. You have broken bones that healed up, or the tail has been broken in places, or some of the spines sticking up on the back were cracked and healed up. So I don't know about anything with teeth, but there is lots of studies that have looked at health of dinosaurs or paleopathology. Are there other animals other than Komodo dragons that could be used in the study, maybe like crocodiles? So, as I said, my coworker Stephanie, she loves looking at crocodiles and looking at crocodile tooth marks. Here's the thing about crocodiles is because of their lifestyle of living in water and preying on animals in rivers and in water and rolling to dismember carcasses and such. Okay, their teeth have been highly modified, and they used to be zyphodonts about 200 plus million years ago, but since then they've changed. So although they're good for research looking at ancient crocodiles and other aquatic reptiles, they're not so good for dinosaurs anymore. So we use them to study different things. Ria's mom would like to know, can pollutants and toxins from oil spills impact fossilized teeth? So we typically don't dig in places where there are lots of pollutants and toxins. A lot of it's so in an indirect way, pollutants and toxins can impact fossils. Not necessarily the chemicals themselves, but when people destroy the environment to get to oil or to get to fossil fuels or to frack into natural gas and things like that, that can damage fossils. So um, in a way, it's not like the pollutants would impact the fossilized teeth in that the stuff underground would influence it. It's more that us getting to that stuff may it may negatively influence teeth. We might break them, we might go through the sediment, things like that. Now what's nice is a lot of the times when people want to dig up fossils, when people want to dig up fossil fuels, they have to have a paleontologist on site to make sure there are no valuable fossils in the area. Connie says, in your field, what is the biggest unsolved mystery or unexplained fossil that I want answered? Whew. Well, there's lots of things. So one of the big questions that we have, actually, this is one of the most interesting things, is during the Cretaceous, there's not a lot of medium-sized dinosaurs. You have meat-eating dinosaurs. There's big tyrannosaurids, like Tyrannosaurus, and then you have very small things. So where's the medium-sized ones? Well, what scientists are thinking now is that the medium-sized dinosaurs were actually the juvenile Tyrannosauruses, and juvenile Tyrannosauruses occupied it's what we call niche, or the area where the ecological area where medium-sized predators would be. So that's one question, like why were there no medium-sized dinosaurs? And we think that the medium-sized dinosaurs were actually teenage tyrannosaurs and they ate medium-sized prey, and then they sometimes grew up into large dinosaurs. There's lots of other questions. Another question is, with dinosaurs, it's the evolution of flight. Birds are dinosaurs, so dinosaurs learned how to fly at some point. Question is when, how many times, were there different styles of flight? Some dinosaurs actually have four wings, where their legs were built like their wings on their arms. But modern birds only have two wings. What was going on there? Why did the ones with four wings die out, but the ones with two wings live? Uh, to me, I think the most interesting question is, why did certain dinosaurs and birds lose their teeth? That's what I want to know. Because there's lots of hypotheses, but I don't think they're great. So I'm actually doing research to figure out if there is a reason why some animals, including some dinosaurs, lost their teeth and evolved a beak, and other ones didn't. This is something I personally think is really interesting. Which dinosaur would you say the Komodo dragon most resembles? Well, tooth-wise, it's very similar to the dromaeosaurs. So Velociraptor, Deinonychus bambiraptor, Dromaeosaurus, Utah raptor, etc. They had the most flattened and the most curved teeth. So from a tooth perspective, definitely those guys. They also had teeth around the similar size. So I would say if you want to use a Komodo dragon as a dinosaur analog, which is what I did, you definitely want to do that. Ever found a T-Rex? I found a relative of the T-Rex, like I said, Bista herverser, but I've never found a T-Rex. My research mostly looks in southern United States. If you want a T-Rex, you got to go to the northern part of the United States or Canada. Go to Alberta, go to Montana, the Dakotas. That's where you want to go. I haven't dug there yet, but I'd like to, and maybe I'll find a T-Rex. So here's hoping. Is there any evidence of small mammals gnawing small bones like mice do for calcium? That is an excellent question. I haven't found any. And I actually know a researcher in Argentina who studies therapsids, which is the group that mammals belong to, but this is older than mammals, so this is a group more ancient than mammals. And I asked him, are there small therapsids that leave marks on bones? And he goes, I don't know. And so we haven't really found much concerning gnawing on bones from small mammals. But another thing is, a lot of researchers don't look for it. Historically, what we do is we try to find the most pretty bones, and that's the ones we dig up. But ugly fossils have a lot of tooth marks. Now, we haven't found any with small mammal marks, but that doesn't mean they're not out there. So perhaps they're out there. We just have to keep looking. And we also have to shift the focus away from the pretty bones to the uglier bones. Okay? That's a great question. And hopefully, maybe I'll do that research, or maybe you'll do that research, because that's a really interesting question. How are new dinosaur species or fossils named? Okay, so this is, it's not super complicated, but it's an interesting process. So when you find a dinosaur, when you find a fossil, and if you think it's a new species, you have to describe it. And so you describe it by looking at all the parts of the skeleton that you find. Whatever bones you have to describe all the parts, every nodule, every process, every single little part of all the bones. And then you need to figure out how different it is from other dinosaurs. So you need to make an argument that this is not just another T-Rex or another Triceratops horridus or another whatever, or Velociraptor mongoliensis. You have to make an argument that it's different. And then what you do is you compare it to other dinosaurs that are closely related to see how it relates to the other ones. And then you name it. And you can kind of just make up the name as you like. There's all kinds of ways to name things. You can name it after the You can name it after the place you found it. You can name it after characteristics of its skeleton. Sometimes it's named after people. Typically, when a dinosaur is named after people, you name it after, a mentor or someone who's a great scientist, or, for example, the person that's funding the dig. So I dig with the LA County Museum, and they dug up a hadrosaur. Um, and the people that funded the dig were named Augustine. That was their last name. So the dinosaur was named Augustainolophus, which means Augustine's dinosaur with a crest. Okay, so that's all kinds of ways. Um, Actually, one of my favorite names is not a dinosaur, but it's an ancient turtle, and it's called Ningemes. Now, Emes means turtle. Ninja Emmys, Ninja Turtle. So they actually named the turtle, a fossil turtle, the Ninja Turtle. That was a lot of fun. Those were around when I was a kid too. What are the fossils that the college students examine now? Um, so a lot of times we don't know because, like I said, they're ugly fossils. So a lot of them are broken pieces. But the fossils that they were examining, a lot of ribs, a lot of parts of ribs from Diplodocids and ankylosaurs. Lots of scutes. So what a scute is it's the little plates along the back of ankylosaurs, little hand bones and foot bones, which we call phalanges, metatarsals, metacarpals. Those are ones that are laying around. Like I said, they found the ugly fossils, the little ones, the ones that are just laying around, and they looked at those, and they did a great job. Okay, so that's what they were looking at. And like I said, there's a lot of interesting information in those. Um, oh, and I misread the question. Where are the fossils? Where do we put fossils after we study them? Museums. Okay, this is another pitch for museums. When you go into a museum and you look at the cool specimens that are out, those aren't where all the fossils are. In the back rooms, you have collections. After collections, you got drawers, and you open the drawers, and there are fossils in those drawers, and that's what the scientists look at. So when a fossil is discovered, and you want to catalog it and put it somewhere, you put it in a museum. This is why museums are important. They're not just for people to go look at cool mounted skeletons. They're also a place for scientists to look at collections. And I was just in Pittsburgh at the Carnegie Museum, and I was looking at some reptile collections. And I'm going to go back and look at their paleo collections. This isn't in the front, it's in the back. Next question, how long does it take to find fossils, and where is there an abundance of them? All right, so it's a little bit of luck, but also you have to know where to look. Okay, so when you're looking for fossils, you want to go to a place that has good preservation. So what you do is you tend to walk around, and if you see fossils eroding out of those rocks, even if they're not in good shape, you know that at least this is an environment where preservation is good. Also, you want to look at certain you want to look at certain time periods. So if you study dinosaurs, you want to study Mesozoic sediments. You don't want to go to a place like, I live in Western New York. In Western New York, there are no Mesozoic sediments. We have Devonian, Ordovician, and more recent, like Pleistocene. So there's mammoths, and we have ancient corals, but no dinosaurs. So you want to look at certain places, and you want to, and you want to you want to look at certain time periods. So where I do my prospecting are the Badlands of New Mexico, and we have very good preservation there, and it's Cretaceous. So that's a really great place to find new fossils. Another thing is the type of sediment. So you want sediment that tends to accumulate fossils. So right now I'm digging in Utah in an ancient riverbed. It's desert now, but back in the day, it was a riverbed. So this riverbed accumulated fossils. Animals would die in the river, they get washed downstream, and they get stuck and get buried. Great place to find fossils. So that's one of the ways you can. That's one of the ways you can determine where fossils are. And like I said, an abundance of them would be found there. Also, there are some sediments that actually are really terrible at preserving fossils. Sometimes they get too acidic and then they just break down the fossil and it doesn't preserve. Um, Other times there are just no fossils around. Mary would like to know, how do you tell if the predator bit once, more than once, or moved over a small amount? That is a tough one. Okay, and it's a very good question. So one of the things that we actually have trouble doing is determining if a tooth mark was made if a bunch of tooth marks were made from a bunch of teeth during one bite or several bites. It's very hard to tell. Okay. Another thing that we have trouble telling is how many animals ate the bone. Was it just one animal that was just going absolutely crazy? Or were there several animals eating a carcass? These things are really hard to tell. This is one of the reasons why we do experiments with live animals. So what I found is when Komodo dragons eat, they scrape their teeth over a bone over and over and over and over to pop off a piece of meat. And they leave marks that are parallel to one another, one next to the other, next to the other, next to the other. And so I was like, okay, this indicates that several movements of the jaw result in several marks that look like this. And that was very helpful to me. And we assume that if we find marks similar in fossils, that means that a dinosaur was probably going scrape, 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 and removing meat that way. But it's at the end of the day, it's just a guess. So it's very difficult to tell. So yeah, we don't know. We can just do experiments with modern animals to make educated guesses. And I'm really, really pushing for more experiments with live animals to learn about dinosaurs. That's one of the things that I personally like. What kind of fossils do you find in Antarctica? Well, there's one the one that pops into my head. It's is it Cryosaurolophus, I believe is the name. It means cold crested lizard or cold crested dinosaur. It's a medium to it's a medium sized Allosaurus sized predator, and it has this interesting little crest. It almost looks like a little tiara. I'm not kidding. I'm serious. It looks like a little tiara that's coming off of the top of this animal's head. Um, and that is one of the major finds that you find in Antarctica. Other fossils that you can find in Antarctica are actually much older. We found several different ancient amphibians, and I mean ancient amphibians that tell us a lot about the evolution of what we call tetrapods, which are all four-legged animals. So they've been a wealth of interesting information from dinosaurs as well as much older deposits. Now, keep in mind, the reason we find these fossils in Antarctica is because Antarctica wasn't where it is now. Now it's cold, but back then it was much further north. It was still in the southern hemisphere. I don't think it's ever not been there, but it definitely was warmer. And therefore, you would find an ecosystem that's much more similar to maybe Jersey or at some points to Canada, but definitely not as harsh as Antarctica is now. So you could find a lot more life there then than you would now. And I believe that's the last question. So those were excellent questions, and I'm really happy to be here and answer any questions and answer all these questions. And also, I just want to say it's great to be here, and museums are great. You should always go to museums, volunteer at museums, work with museums. They're a resource that without them, I wouldn't be able to do my research, and I don't even know if I'd have an interest in dinosaurs if it wasn't for museums.
Thank you so much, Dominic, and I completely agree with you. And that was a very interesting talk. I loved every second of it, and I have so many more questions for you, but we are all done here for tonight. And thank you to the audience for joining us tonight. We hope you had fun as well. And so we will be starting up our Ask a Geologist series on October 21st. And so our first speaker will be Michael Schwab, and he will be speaking about Meteor Crater that's located in Arizona. and he'll be talking about, he'll be talking all about that Barringer crater. So join us on Thursday, October 21st, from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And thanks again, Domenic. It was great having you, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.